What are the biggest challenges right now and over the next year or so facing venture capital-backed companies and board members involved in those challenges? I think about AI, which is, who knows what the future holds. I think it's great, but there's some challenges. So that's sort of one thing. But challenges of politics, geopolitics, wars, et cetera, et cetera. What are public companies and venture-backed companies thinking about right now as the challenges that they face as a business? And how do board members get involved in those, or do they?
Yeah, it's a challenging time. Look, private companies. We've all been in the business. I met Lynn, I think in the 01, 02 timeframe. I joined the venture business in 00. That was a crazy time. The bubble era down to the declines through 04, 05 was hard. Similarly, lots and lots of companies have raised money at fabulous valuations in 21, raised money at multiples of the public valuations then. So deals that got done at 20 times, 30 times revenues, or 20 times, 30 times in the next 12 months revenues, and so on. And so it's a challenge because now they have to grow into those valuations. Money is not available in plenty, and any round was going to be at a significantly lower valuations, and so on. So there is this, as a result, companies have massively cut back on expenses, focus much more on profitability, and so that's happened. So navigating through what does growth look like, how do you ever grow into the last round's valuation when you're cutting your sales and marketing expenses, and how do you balance the tension between growth versus profitability, is a challenge. And so that's companies and boards are finding that. And of course, all of us as our investors also, we all, look, the key is we all wear two hats. I represent the interests of my limited partners. I'm an investor, and I have a fiduciary duty towards my private company as a board member there. And so those are two sometimes in conflict kind of responsibilities. And so companies will require likely more capital, but unfortunately, market valuations would say it has to be a lower price. And how do you write a check into a company which needs to be at a lower price, because that's what public market valuations say, but yet as a board member representing fiduciary duties towards the portfolio, towards the company, you want to maximize the price for that business. So that creates an inherent, an inherent challenge, inherent conflict to manage and navigate through. So, and especially that's more acute, especially as you go into situations where down rounds, structured down rounds have become more normal. How do board members who represent their funds and are investors, and how do you manage that inherent conflict between the two responsibilities you have, one towards your LPs and one towards the company, and how do you rationalize that to help the portfolio company survive, because the financing needs to happen for survival purposes, is playing out for a very difficult and a challenging dynamic here when we talk about at the board level. So that's going to get played out. It's getting played out. Will get played out even more so through 24.
Yeah, I'll chime in. The boards I'm involved in and the other board members I talk to, things that are being worried about. It obviously depends on the business. So a consumer business, a worldwide consumer business like Bumble, is going to care more about worldwide geopolitical events and what's going on around the world than Q2, for instance. And in fact, even Bumble 2 years ago had 105 employees in Moscow. So they had to completely deal with that on a dime. So they will worry about macroeconomic and geopolitical risk in a different way. At Q2, they sell into a particular industry. And so we all know what happened last spring with Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic and all that. And so they're going to keep their hand on what's going on with financial services industry, what's going on with our community banks and our regional banks and all of that, which I don't think Bumble probably cares anything about. So I think there's the industry-specific and company-specific things that create a lot of time in the boardroom. I think that AI is over it all. I don't think anyone, can say they're not thinking about AI in some way at the board level, but at the executive management level, it's how are we going to use it to help our operation? It's, one trail, how are we going to use it to help our product or change our product, with our customers? How are we not going to do anything wrong? So putting the risk hat on and find ourselves stubbing our toe. So I think that every single board meeting, there's discussion about that.
Great. So Oksana, let's go even deeper on what we're just talking about, these challenges, and let's go back to earlier stage, what you work with, venture, pre-venture, pre-seed venture. So all these things, product design, value creation, company direction, governance, fiduciary oversight, C-level compensation, business leadership, development, fundraising, through series whatever, and then exit opportunities. As a board member of a venture-backed company, and look, we all have different backgrounds. We all bring different things to the table in terms of our experiences and backgrounds of what we can bring to a company, which is why we would serve on a board. Where do you input and influence on a board when you invest from Sputnik or outside of Sputnik? And how do you divvy that up as a board? And what's more important than another, or is it? And I probably didn't list off 25 other things that the board
there are
needs to
25. The challenge, with a small company, in many ways, they face all the same issues that the big company does, but they have considerably less resources. And considerably less resource, not just in terms of the people that are going to tackle them, but also in terms of the skills of the people that are going to tackle them. So imagine you are a recent, maybe a PhD grad, maybe you have a degree in computer science, all you have done, you've had this big idea, and you build this technology, and it could deal with AI. So for instance, maybe I'll zoom in on an AI-specific company. So new technologies is what you always deal with. And then you started this business because you had a dream. With board comes a lot of formalities. No one probably, when they start a business at my stage, dreams about, gee, I wish I would have a really distinguished board, right? Right? I think because that's not how they start. But as a venture capitalist that is guiding them so that the concept of, as you grow up, for your dream to become a reality, if you have a magic wand, you're going to have these attributes. So how do we start building them? How do you start influencing people? A lot of the dialogue is training of the CEO. Yes, you owe your board a responsibility. You owe your board a report. No, you won't send the presentation 30 minutes before the meeting and I think so you basically, so this is very much the coaching so that when they do get to the later round, you're gonna get a CEO that is already schooled and trained in knowing how to operate with her board. So I think for me, the bigger challenge, I deal often with the board formation. I often advise with, okay, this person is coming on the board. How do you think about independence? You have to educate often founders. You're going to cede some control of your company. You were the queen of your company because in some ways you owned it, but now you're going to give these people that are shareholders a significant vote in how your company will be and how your dream will develop, and this is why this is the right thing for you, right? So I think, to me, my world, as it relates to the board, has to do with these very fundamentals. And then, like anything, you could tackle everything, but not everything at the same time. So I think also equipping CEO with a way to dialogue with the board members about and agreeing and aligning the priorities of the companies and why they're priorities for the company. And often that has to do with raising the next round and attracting the check, staying in business. And that, I think, is the bit they understand quite well. But tackling, okay, you need to have the insurance. Like, what is that? What is a D&O? Why it's necessary? Like, you know, like this, like if you think about, none of those things come natural to the nascent companies, because my stage generally is a stage of the kindergarten for the startups before they become adults and become unicorns and public companies. And that's when they will be working with Lynn. Which data is relevant? Like, so how do you start making, like, what financial projections are relevant? Because, like Krishna mentioned this earlier, it's a whiteboard. You're building, like, what is the product market fit? So how you present to your board members plethora of that information and explain to them, like, because the financial projections are way more difficult because before you're not quite clear who your customers are, what's the margin, what's the right pricing strategy for a product. So all of the very basic fundamentals then later boards will hold their CEOs and the management team accountable for, I think are very relevant. By the same token, often you bring in the board members, and useful board members who are not investors often are executives, and for many of them it could be their first board position. So you have also that education. What is your duty as a board member? How is it different from your duty as an executive? It's like what the concept that is very difficult for many to understand is noses in, fingers out. I mean, that actually is like one of the biggest things that's hard for people to get. Yet I think it's one of those things where as a board member you have to know what's happening, but you're not an operator in that business, someone else is. And so most of my difficulties that I deal with have to do with that fundamental setup, which, if handled well, is gonna produce a stronger, more robust company, but yet it has to be put in place.
Noses in, fingers out. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to pick up the thread from there, and it's an important, goes to the core values at Live Oak here. Often we are first investors. Often the board is getting built for the first time. Let's take Homeward, this tremendous company and incredible founder who is running his own business, one of the super leaders in the country from a real estate perspective. Age of 24, running the first brokerage, most productive brokerage in Austin. And then I invest in him about almost 7-8 years after that. And so he's been the lord of his kingdom. And so at the time we invested in him, we gave him $2 million, and it was just, he was the only employee in the company. So he and I on the board, number of board members greater than number of employees of the business. But so that board seat, because we're that investors, obviously we got a board seat. But then began the journey from a board seat you're entitled to as the only investor in the business to truly earning the right to be much more than that. To earning the right to be the first person Tim would call outside of a spouse for good news and bad news. But that evolution is one of the most challenging things, where he looks at you and says, are you my boss? Are you as an investor here who's going to take advantage of me? Are you truly in this for the interests of Homeward and Tim Heil? Or are you in this figuring a way to line up Live Oak's pockets here? So that's what, and I think we strive hard, and anybody who joins Live Oak, that's the stripes they need to work hard to earn, is how do you play the multifaceted roles of course being value added, but also being, a boss as a board member, but also more importantly being a mentor, a philosopher, a guide, a friend, a therapist, right?
Yeah.
It's a lonely job being a CEO through all the challenges and through the evolution of the business, and playing those at the right times with the right kind of an approach, the right kind of a hand, is what earns you the right to be that person, the first call they make for good news, of course, and for bad news. And that's what we strive to be as board members of these growing companies, and earn the right to be that. And I just think those are the values and the ethos that we look for every one of us, and my partners, is to drive to being to operate in that capacity on the boards of our businesses.
That's a great example. And I'm sure we can sit here all night and hear more examples, which I would love for you to use. If you can use names, great. If you can't, just let us know the stories, because there are lots of stories about founders who fail, lots of those stories, and lots of stories like the one you just mentioned, Krishna, about Tim, who that's fantastic.